Hello, welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving deep into something, well, completely central to modern life. Yet, it has a side we often don't fully confront. We're talking about the often unseen downsides of smartphone use.
That's right. These devices, they started as simple tools, didn't they, for communication, but they've rapidly evolved into these indispensable, constant companions. They reshape how we interact, how we work, even how our brains function. And for many people, that convenience sort of masks a growing problem.
Absolutely. What began as, a helpful tool has, for a lot of us, morphed into something more compulsive, maybe even addictive. We're looking at smartphone addiction, sometimes called nomophobia, that fear of being without your phone.
Right.
Our goal today is really to explore the information we have, pulling out the most important insights, the perhaps surprising facts, and those real-life examples to understand the true depth of this issue.
And the sheer scale is, well, it's eye-opening. Research indicates the average person checks their phone a remarkable 96 times a day.
96 times.
Yep. Think about that. It's roughly every 10 minutes you're awake, you're probably reaching for that device.
Wow. That's pervasive. And for a significant number of people, it's actually far more intense, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. We see reports showing individuals spending 7, even up to 10 hours daily just engrossed in their screens.
10 hours. That's huge.
It is. And the consequences of this habit are incredibly wide-ranging. They touch our mental state, our most important relationships, our ability to be productive, even our physical health.
So where do we start?
Well, I think we should start by looking at the fundamental science driving this pull, then examine the specific consequences for you, the listener, personally. After that, we can sort of zoom out to the wider impacts on society and in the workplace. We'll also need to dedicate some time to the unique challenges for children and adolescents.
Okay.
And finally, explore potential strategies and, solutions for moving forward.
Sounds good. Let's start there then. What is it about these little rectangles that makes them so incredibly compelling, so hard to put down?
At its core, it taps directly into our brain's reward system.
Okay.
Every notification, every new message delivers a small, quick hit of dopamine.
Dopamine, the feel-good chemical.
Exactly. Our brain's feel-good chemical. It creates a sense of pleasure and, crucially, anticipation for the next reward.
So it's like a tiny positive reinforcement loop just happening constantly.
Precisely. And app designers are exceptionally good at leveraging this. They use algorithms and variable reward schedules.
Variable rewards. What does that mean exactly?
Think about pulling down to refresh your social media feed. You never know what interesting piece of content or notification will appear or when it will appear.
Ah, right, like a slot machine. You keep pulling the lever because you might just hit the jackpot this time.
That comparison is made all the time because it's so apt. As one expert, Dr. Anna Lemke, puts it, smartphones offer an endless stream of micro-rewards.
An endless stream.
Yeah, and this constant, easily accessible stream can actually lead to a form of tolerance in the brain's pleasure pathways.
Tolerance, like with drugs.
In a similar way, yes, you need more and more time on the device to achieve the same level of satisfaction you got initially. And the fact that your phone is always available just exacerbates this. It's an ever-present temptation.
Okay, beyond the neurochemistry, though, there must be deeper psychological and social reasons we get drawn in, right?
Absolutely. A major driver is the fear of missing out, FOMO.
Ah, FOMO.
We feel compelled to constantly check updates because we worry we're not in the loop, not seeing the latest news or what everyone else is doing.
That makes sense.
For others, feelings of loneliness or anxiety might push them towards virtual connections as a kind of substitute for real-world interaction. We've seen research, like a study back in 2019, specifically linking higher social anxiety levels to more problematic smartphone use patterns.
And the design itself plays a massive role, I imagine. Things like infinite scroll, videos that just start playing, those bright red notification bubbles, they can't be accidents.
Oh, they're very deliberate. Tristan Harris, who used to be a design ethicist at Google, has pointed this out. He talks about tech companies being in an intense race for our attention.
A race for attention.
Yeah, and they build these platforms specifically to win that race. This intentional engineering makes it incredibly hard to disengage, even when we kind of recognize the negative effects.
Okay, so that explains why these devices are so sticky, so hard to ignore. Now let's get into the impact. What does all this constant engagement actually mean for you, the listener?
Well, the impact on mental health is probably one of the most significant and, frankly, concerning consequences.
How so?
There's a really well-established link between excessive screen time and increased rates of anxiety, depression, and just general stress. One study in 2017, it focused on adolescents, found that those spending over 3 hours a day on their phones were at a considerably higher risk for experiencing depressive symptoms.
3 hours, and that's considered high risk.
Wow.
And I guess social media, with its constant stream of perfect-looking lives, feeds right into that.
It definitely can. Constantly comparing your own real, often messy life to the curated, sometimes artificial lives presented online can severely erode self-esteem.
Yeah.
This is particularly true for young people.
Yeah.
We looked into the story of Sarah, a 19-year-old college student. She was spending hours scrolling through Instagram and TikTok every day, really fixated on what others seemed to have.
Okay.
This constant comparison led to her feeling inadequate, her grades suffered, she started withdrawing from friends. It wasn't until she sought therapy that she really connected her spiraling depression back to her intense phone use, which she was using as a way to avoid confronting her own insecurities.
That's powerful. Her experience shows just how deep that link can be.
It really does. And it's not just how we feel internally, it clearly affects our relationships too.
How does that usually play out?
Well, it creates distance and tension with family, with friends, with romantic partners. We even have a term for it now, phubbing.
Phubbing.
Yeah, phone snubbing.
Yeah.
The act of ignoring the person you're actually with in favor of your phone.
Right. I've definitely seen that happen.
Yeah.
Or done it myself, probably.
We all have, likely. And that phubbing has real consequences for connection. Research from 2021 explicitly showed that being on the receiving end of phubbing negatively impacts relationship satisfaction.
Makes sense. It leaves the other person feeling neglected, unimportant.
Exactly. A really striking example is Mark and Emily. Emily became increasingly frustrated by Mark's constant phone use during their time together, even at dinner or when they were trying to have a conversation. She just felt invisible.
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah, and in therapy, Mark eventually admitted he was using his phone as an escape, mostly from work stress. Their story really illustrates how this habit, even if it's driven by other pressures, can seriously damage intimacy and connection within a relationship.
Okay, so mental health, relationships.
Right.
What about our ability to actually focus, to be productive? Smartphones are often marketed as tools to enhance efficiency, but feels like they often do the opposite.
That's the major paradox, isn't it? While they're presented as productivity aids, the constant stream of notifications and that almost unconscious urge to check actually fragment our attention mercilessly.
Yeah.
It becomes incredibly difficult to engage in what's often called deep work, that focused, undisturbed concentration you need for complex tasks.
Right.
And there was a fascinating study in 2016 from the University of Texas that demonstrated this brain drain effect.
Brain drain.
Yeah, it showed that just having your smartphone nearby, even if it's turned off, actually reduces your usable cognitive capacity.
Wait, even if it's off, the mere presence is a distraction? That's kind of wild.
It is wild. It seems to occupy a part of your brain just by being there, anticipating potential notifications maybe. We saw this manifest with Alex, a 28-year-old marketing manager.
What happened with him?
His performance at work really suffered because he was constantly breaking his focus to check his phone. He started missing deadlines, relationships with colleagues got strained. It wasn't until he consciously implemented a no-phone policy during focused work periods that he was able to regain his productivity.
So his situation clearly shows how this habit can actively sabotage professional output.
Absolutely. And we can't overlook the physical toll either. It's not just mental or social.
Right, the physical side. What are we talking about there?
Common physical symptoms include things like eye strain, persistent headaches, and definitely disrupted sleep patterns.
Ah, the sleep issue, the blue light, right?
Exactly. The blue light emitted by screens, especially when used close to bedtime, is known to delay melatonin production, which really impacts sleep quality. A 2020 study highlighted this. Then there are the musculoskeletal issues. Text neck, from constantly hunching over devices.
Text neck. I think we all know someone with that or feel it ourselves sometimes.
It's a real and growing problem. And even increased risk of things like carpal tunnel syndrome from the repetitive motions of scrolling and typing.
Wow. Okay, we heard about Priya, right? A graphic designer.
Yes, Priya, 24 years old. She developed chronic neck pain and migraines after years of hunching over her phone for both work and personal use. Her diagnosis was forward head posture, directly related to her phone habits.
And does she find relief?
Physical therapy was necessary to help her recover, yes, but her experience is a really potent physical reminder of the consequences of that prolonged poor posture so often associated with phone use.
So the impacts are deeply personal, affecting how we feel, how we connect, how we work, how our bodies function day to day. But you mentioned these habits also ripple outwards, influencing society and our workplaces more broadly.
Yes, definitely. A major shift we've seen is just the sheer normalization of constant connectivity. It's become so deeply ingrained in our culture that being always reachable is almost expected now.
Yeah, that pressure is real, especially with work.
Exactly. It's evident in the pressure many feel from work to respond to emails or messages outside of traditional hours, constantly blurring the lines between professional and personal life.
And you see it everywhere socially too, don't you? People in groups at restaurants, but everyone's just looking down at their own screen instead of engaging with each other.
Precisely. And this widespread acceptance has significant implications, especially for the younger generation. It's shaping how they understand social interaction, how they learn about attention spans.
How so?
Well, a 2022 report revealed something quite telling. 62% of teenagers feel their parents are distracted by their devices when they are supposed to be spending time together.
62%. Wow. That statistic alone highlights how this issue permeates family dynamics and kind of sets a model for behavior, doesn't it?
It really does. And there's also a tangible economic cost to all of this. It's not just social or personal.
An economic cost. How does that work?
Well, you factor in reduced productivity due to those constant distractions we talked about.
Right, the task switching.
Exactly. Add to that healthcare costs related to the associated mental and physical health issues, anxiety, depression, text neck.
Okay.
And even workplace errors linked to lack of focus. When you add it all up, the total economic impact is staggering. One estimate from 2019 suggested a cost of $15 billion per year just for U.S. businesses in lost productivity alone.
$15 billion. That's huge.
It is. And that doesn't even count the potential individual costs, like missed career opportunities or maybe financial strain from excessive in-app spending on games or shopping.
Focusing specifically on the workplace again, you mentioned that always-on culture. How is that really showing up day to day?
It's become a dominant force. A study just this year, 2024, found that a remarkable 68% of employees feel a compulsion to check work notifications after hours.
68%. That sounds exhausting, like you can never fully switch off.
It truly is. This constant state of readiness is a direct contributor to increased stress and ultimately burnout for many.
Is there an example of this?
Yeah, we heard about David Bolick, a software engineer. He experienced severe burnout. His job involved constant notifications that essentially followed him home. This led to chronic stress, significantly straining his family life. He actually had to take a leave of absence and then implement really strict boundaries, like disabling all work notifications after a certain time, just to regain some control.
His situation is a really stark reminder of how workplace expectations fueled by these devices can lead to serious health consequences.
Absolutely. And we touched on the productivity paradox earlier. These devices are meant to help, but often seem to hinder.
Right.
It's very apparent in professional settings. Smartphones create significant task switching costs every single time you divert your attention to check a notification and then try to get back to your original task.
It takes time to refocus.
Exactly. Research from 2023 found that employees who frequently check their phones were actually 20% less productive on complex tasks.
20% less productive.
Yeah. And that same study noted that phone use during meetings significantly reduced team engagement and overall collaboration. People just weren't fully present.
So it impacts both individual output and how well teams work together.
Correct. Sophia, a project manager, noticed this directly. Her team members were frequently scrolling during important planning meetings. Discussions were becoming less productive, decisions took longer.
So what does she do?
She implemented a phones-off policy just for meetings, and she observed a significant improvement in focus and team interaction almost immediately.
That's interesting. Are companies starting to recognize this and do something about it?
Some progressive companies are, yes. We're seeing initiatives like Google's digital well-being program, or companies implementing no-device zones or times, or offering workshops on mindful technology use. But it's still relatively early days for widespread adoption.
Okay, so we've covered individual impacts, societal norms, workplace issues. Let's turn our attention now to a particularly vulnerable group: children and adolescents.
Yes, this is a crucial area. Kids and teens are exceptionally vulnerable, mainly because their brains are still in critical stages of development. Their capacity for self-regulation, for impulse control, is still maturing.
Right, so high levels of screen time could be more damaging for them?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
High levels during these formative years could interfere with crucial aspects of cognitive development, things like attention span, and also the ability to effectively manage emotions.
That's a major concern for parents and educators. What are the findings telling us here?
Well, a study conducted just last year, 2023, looked at children aged 8 to 12. It found that those spending over 4 hours daily on smartphones performed less well on tasks requiring sustained attention.
4 hours, okay.
The research also suggested possible links between that heavy use and potential delays in language development, and maybe the development of weaker social skills compared to kids with less screen time.
We heard about Liam, didn't we? A 14-year-old.
Yes, Liam's story was quite concerning. He'd been an honor roll student, but as his screen time, mostly from gaming and social media, escalated dramatically, his academic performance just plummeted.
What happened?
He stopped doing homework, became much more irritable, and really struggled to focus during class. His parents eventually got him into a digital detox program.
Did that help?
His ability to concentrate did improve afterwards, which offers some hope. But his story really highlights a challenge that many families are facing right now.
And for teenagers specifically, social media seems like a double-edged sword.
It really is. It offers vital avenues for connection, which is so important at that age. But it also exposes them to this constant barrage of idealized, often completely unattainable images and lifestyles.
Which ties right back to the mental health effects we discussed earlier, particularly around self-esteem and comparison.
Precisely. A 2021 study found that teenage girls spending more than 2 hours daily just on Instagram reported significantly higher levels of body dissatisfaction. They are also more likely to exhibit symptoms related to eating disorders.
2 hours on Instagram, that seems quite common for many teens.
It is common, and the pervasive use of filters and heavily edited photos just creates these incredibly unrealistic standards for physical appearance, which can be really damaging.
Aisha's story was particularly striking, the 16-year-old in London.
Yes, Aisha reportedly developed a concerning obsession with her appearance after spending hours scrolling through TikTok and Instagram feeds. These feeds were dominated by carefully curated, often digitally altered images.
What did that lead to?
She started using excessive filters on her own photos, trying to match that impossible standard. She also began restricting her eating in an attempt to emulate the influencers she followed. Her parents ultimately had to seek professional help for her.
Her struggle is such a powerful illustration of how excessive social media use can amplify existing insecurities, especially during those vulnerable teenage years.
It really is. And parents are undeniably navigating a really difficult landscape here. Well, they often feel devices are necessary, maybe for safety or for schoolwork coordination, yet they struggle immensely to enforce healthy screen time limits. A 2024 survey revealed that 70% of parents find setting these boundaries challenging.
70%. That's a huge majority feeling that struggle.
It is. And adding another layer to it, many parents in that same survey admitted they themselves are frequently distracted by their own devices.
The modeling problem.
Exactly. It potentially creates this cycle where the very people trying to set the rules are modeling the problematic behavior themselves.
So it's crystal clear this is a complex, multi-layered issue. It affects individuals, families, workplaces, society as a whole. How do we even begin to find a way forward? How do we regain some control?
Well, the essential first step really is personal awareness. Recognizing if you might have a problem.
What are the signs?
Things like feeling anxious or restless when you don't have your phone nearby. Noticing that you're neglecting other important responsibilities because you're on your phone. Or experiencing actual discomfort or withdrawal symptoms when you try to disconnect.
Okay.
There are even simple self-assessment tools available online, like the smartphone addiction scale, that can be a helpful starting point just to gauge your own usage patterns.
Okay, so awareness first. Once someone recognizes there might be an issue, what are some practical steps they can take, maybe right away?
There are several concrete strategies. Setting clear boundaries is absolutely critical.
Like what kind of boundaries?
Designate specific phone-free zones. The bedroom is a big one. Or the dining table during meals. Or set phone-free times, like the hour before bed or the first hour after waking up. There are also apps, like Forest or Freedom, that can help enforce these boundaries by temporarily blocking access to distracting websites or apps if you need that extra nudge.
Okay, what else?
A surprisingly effective trick is using grayscale mode on your phone.
Grayscale, making the screen black and white.
Exactly. It reduces the vibrant colors that make apps so visually appealing and stimulating, It just makes them less tempting to mindlessly open and scroll through.
Huh. That's a simple idea, but I can see how that might work. What else?
Actively tracking your screen time is key. Most modern smartphones have built-in features that show you exactly how much time you're spending and on which apps.
Right, those reports can be pretty shocking sometimes.
They can. Use that information. Set daily limits for the apps that are consuming the most time, especially things like social media or games.
Okay.
Another really effective approach is habit replacement. Consciously swap the time you'd normally spend on your phone with healthier or more fulfilling activities.
Like what?
For instance, instead of scrolling during your commute, maybe listen to a podcast like this one, or try a short meditation. Find something else to fill that space.
Good suggestions.
Yeah.
And what if the problem feels too big, too overwhelming to handle just with these individual strategies?
Then seeking professional help is a really important and completely valid step. Therapists can provide support and specific strategies. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is often used.
How does CBT help?
It helps you identify and address the underlying thoughts and triggers that are driving the compulsive behavior, and then helps you build new, healthier habits and coping mechanisms.
It really does feel like this problem is bigger than just individual willpower, though, doesn't it? Don't tech companies and maybe society as a whole have a responsibility here?
Oh, they absolutely do. Addressing this effectively really requires collective action and systemic change. It's not just on the individual.
So what's the role of tech companies?
Well, they have an ethical responsibility in how they design their products. Features that are explicitly engineered to maximize engagement, things like infinite scroll, autoplay videos, those variable rewards we talked about, they should be reevaluated with user well-being genuinely in mind.
Have any insiders spoken out about this?
Yes, even some former tech insiders, like Chamath Palihapitiya, have publicly expressed feeling tremendous guilt over their role in building features they knew were addictive.
Wow. Have any companies taken meaningful steps yet?
Some limited steps have been taken. Apple and Google, for instance, introduced those screen time tracking features around 2018.
Right.
But honestly, these tools are often kind of hidden away in settings, and many people don't even use them. Truly radical design changes that might actually decrease engagement and therefore potentially decrease revenue are still relatively uncommon.
Which naturally leads to calls for more forceful intervention, maybe like regulation.
Yes, increasingly there's an argument being made that governments should hold tech companies accountable for creating addictive products, perhaps similar to how industries like tobacco or gambling are regulated.
Has that happened anywhere?
Well, in 2023, the European Union proposed some guidelines for more ethical app design, which included restrictions on certain manipulative features. But implementing and enforcing such regulations globally is, as you can imagine, a really complex challenge.
Yeah. Are there any examples of places that have been more proactive in tackling this issue at a national level?
South Korea is often cited as a notable example. They have extremely high smartphone penetration, and connectivity is deeply embedded in the culture.
Okay.
Concerned about rising addiction rates, especially among young people, they've implemented various measures. They had a shutdown law back in 2019 that restricted online gaming access for kids under 16 after midnight. They also fund digital detox camps for adolescents.
And has it made a difference?
A report in 2024 indicated about a 15% reduction in problematic smartphone use among teenagers since some of these programs were introduced. So it demonstrates that systemic interventions can have a measurable impact.
That's encouraging. Education seems like another critical piece of this puzzle, right? Empowering users with knowledge.
Absolutely crucial. Digital literacy programs are becoming more and more important, both in schools and for adults.
What do they typically cover?
They aim to teach people about healthy technology use, how to recognize the signs of addictive behavior in themselves and others, and importantly, to understand the specific design tactics that apps use to keep them hooked.
Have these programs been shown to work?
Yes, a 2024 evaluation of a digital literacy program in Australian schools showed that participating students reported both reduced screen time and an improved ability to focus afterwards.
And there was that interesting initiative in Toronto you mentioned earlier.
Right. A high school there introduced a curriculum that actually covered the neuroscience behind addiction alongside mindful phone use strategies. Students learned how apps are designed to manipulate their attention, which many found really eye-opening.
Did it have an effect?
The initiative also included workshops for parents, and the school reported a 30% decrease in classroom distractions within just a year of implementation.
That's significant. What about broader public awareness?
Public awareness campaigns are also valuable tools. The UK had a Screen Smart campaign in 2024, encouraging families to establish phone-free times and zones. It reportedly led to a 15% increase in families adopting such practices. Australia had a similar campaign called Unplug to Connect.
It's also fascinating how the specific dynamics of smartphone addiction can vary across different cultures, isn't it?
It really does vary. The prevalence and the specific drivers of addiction aren't uniform globally. They depend heavily on cultural norms, the rate of technology adoption in a country, economic factors.
So where do we see higher rates, for example?
Well, in some East Asian countries like South Korea and China, where smartphone penetration is extremely high and connectivity norms are different, addiction rates among young adults tend to be higher than in places like the US.
Really? By how much?
A 2024 comparison found problematic use rates among young adults were around 30% in South Korea and China, compared to approximately 20% in the United States.
What might contribute to that difference? Is it just access?
Access is part of it, but cultural factors play a significant role too. In some more collectivist cultures, there can be intense social pressure to remain constantly connected and responsive, perhaps to group messages or community platforms.
Can you give an example?
We heard about Hiroshi, a 22-year-old student in Tokyo. He felt intense pressure to respond immediately to messages online, a popular app there. This constant need to check his phone led to significant sleep deprivation and anxiety. It reflects those cultural expectations of constant availability to the group.
And how does that contrast with, say, Western cultures?
In many Western cultures, the drive might be more tied to individualism and the pursuit of personal validation, particularly through social media.
Ah, the likes and follows.
Exactly. The pressure to curate that perfect online persona, the constant seeking of likes, comments, followers, that can be a major driver of excessive use here. For example, American college students are estimated to spend an average of 5 hours a day just on social media.
5 hours. Wow. So it's a different set of cultural pressures, maybe, but the outcome, excessive time on the device, can be quite similar.
Pretty much, yes. Different roads leading to a similar destination.
Looking ahead now, what are the emerging technological trends that could either worsen this issue or maybe potentially help with it?
That's a great question. We're seeing technologies like augmented reality, AR, and virtual reality, VR, becoming more integrated into daily life.
Right.
These could potentially deepen the level of immersion, making it even harder, perhaps, to disengage from digital worlds.
Right.
Wearable devices, too, are further blurring the lines between our physical and digital experiences.
Are there predictions about how common this will become?
One prediction from Gartner suggests that by 2030, as many as 40% of smartphone users will integrate AR or VR experiences into their daily routines in some way.
40%. So the technology itself is only getting more powerful, more immersive, and potentially more addictive.
That's a distinct possibility, yes. And artificial intelligence, AI, also presents a kind of dual-edged sword here. Well, AI can definitely be used to enhance the addictiveness of apps through incredibly personalized content feeds and notifications, tailored perfectly to keep you engaged.
But the other edge?
But AI also has the potential to power tools that could help us combat addiction, maybe by detecting problematic usage patterns automatically and suggesting timely interventions or breaks.
Interesting. So AI could be part of the problem, part of the solution.
Potentially, yes. It depends how it's developed and deployed.
Despite all these challenges and the accelerating technology, it does feel like there's also a growing awareness, maybe some hope for change.
There definitely is. We're seeing grassroots movements like digital minimalism, popularized by authors like Cal Newport, advocating for a much more intentional and limited relationship with technology. Online communities are growing rapidly, where people share strategies and offer support for reducing screen time, places like Reddit or even on X. And as we discussed, educational initiatives are expanding, teaching mindful technology use from a younger age.
Can individual change really make a difference?
Absolutely. The story of Maria, a 32-year-old teacher, is quite inspiring. She realized she was spending up to 9 hours a day on her phone.
9 hours?
Yes, and she felt she was genuinely missing out on her actual life. So she deliberately adopted a more minimalist phone setup, removed all social media apps, turned off most notifications. She even sometimes used a simpler dumb phone just for calls and basic texts.
And what was the result for her?
She reported significant improvements in her focus, her sleep quality, and importantly, her connections with her family. Her journey really shows that individual action, while definitely challenging, can lead to truly transformative results.
This deep dive has really illuminated the complex and multifaceted nature of smartphone addiction. We've explored everything from the neuroscience that hooks us to its profound impacts on our individual well-being, our relationships, our work, our kids, and even the fabric of society.
It's become clear, hasn't it, that addressing this isn't simply a matter of individual willpower or just blaming the technology itself. It really requires a combination of things.
Like what?
Personal effort, definitely, to set those boundaries and cultivate healthier habits. But also broader, systemic changes in how tech is designed, how we educate people about its impact, and potentially through more thoughtful regulation down the line.
And the goal isn't necessarily to abandon technology altogether, is it? These devices are incredibly powerful tools when used right.
Exactly. It's about striving for mindful use, making sure that technology genuinely enhances our lives and our connections rather than consuming or dominating them.
Which leaves us with a final thought to maybe ponder. How is this pervasive, constant expectation of immediate availability driven fundamentally by these devices in our pockets? How is that reshaping the very nature of human interaction? And maybe even our collective patience in the long term?
That's a deep question to sit with.
Something to really think about. If you found this deep dive insightful, please do like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more.